way we define obesity could be changing in the near future. And recently, you may have even seen some articles or headlines talking about how the amount of Americans who are obese has suddenly doubled, or how obesity rates used to be about 40% of the population, but it's now actually 70%. This does not mean that a bunch of people became obese overnight. It instead is reflecting what could happen to the numbers if we do in fact change the way that we define obesity. And this has all come about because of a research paper that was published just last week, which put forward and actually applied a potential new way of defining obesity. So today I will be going through and explaining what's going on, what this new definition is, and why it's important. So let's go. So obesity is currently measured using something called BMI, and this stands for Body Mass Index. You may have already heard of it before. Now this is just a pretty simple calculation. Your BMI is your weight in kilograms, and that's divided by the square of your height. Now you can calculate it yourself using this formula and you'd sub in your own values, or you can use one of the many online calculators that do it all for you. You just put in your height and your weight. Whatever method you use, you will get a number at the end. And if this number is 30 or higher, then you would be classified as obese. Now on the screen now, I will just put up the BMI classifications that we currently have. These are from the World Health Organization, which is what most countries will follow. And so you can see here that less than 18.5 is actually considered underweight. 25 to 30 is considered overweight, but not yet technically obese. And then 30 and above is obese, with obesity classes as you get higher up over 30. Now BMI has been and still is quite useful, especially on a population level, because it's quick and easy to calculate and it helps us track trends in population over time. But if we zoom in on an individual level, then there can be some problems. The main reason for this is because BMI doesn't actually measure the amount of body fat that a person has. So you can have two people with the same BMI, but one person may just have a lot of muscle and quite a little bit of fat, while the other person, they have more visceral fat, which is the fat that surrounds organs and increases the risk of diabetes and heart disease. Now, I will be explaining these issues with BMI in a bit more detail in next week's video, so subscribe to make sure you don't miss that one. But essentially, because of these issues with BMI, many experts have been saying for quite some time that we need to move beyond BMI, which is what this new definition of obesity is trying to achieve. Obesity needs to be more than just what someone weighs. We need to look further than the number on the scale and see how much fat is actually present. Where is it being stored? And what is it doing to the body? Because all of those things together, they can give us a much better understanding of what's going on with someone's health. So what is this new definition that has been brought up? Well, earlier this year, 56 experts from more than 75 medical organizations, they all came together to discuss the big problem, that after decades of research, there was still no global agreement on what obesity actually is, and we can't deal with something we don't even know how to define. And so what they proposed was a new diagnostic framework that can tell us when having some excess fat on the body is just a risk factor, meaning it increases the risk of other health conditions like diabetes or heart disease. And this is what they want to call preclinical obesity. And then this may progress to clinical obesity, which is when the fat is actually causing organ damage or physical limitations for an individual. We can't get this information using BMI alone. So what was recommended was combining BMI with other body size measurements like waist circumference, waist to hip ratio, or waist to height ratio, which are all still simple and inexpensive tools that anyone can use. And so at the end point of all these discussions was the fact that obesity could be diagnosed in three main ways. The first is called BMI plus anthropometric obesity. So this is when BMI is above the usual cutoff rate, so 30 or above, and one of the waist measures is elevated. So that could be waist circumference, waist to hip, or waist to height. But if your BMI is simply above 40, then you fit this regardless of your waist measurements. Now the second is called anthropometric only obesity. And this is when at least 2 of the waist measures are elevated, even if your BMI is less than 30. So your waist circumference, your waist to hip ratio, or your waist to height ratio. 2 of these need to be considered high, your BMI doesn't matter. Now this one is going to capture people with hidden visceral fat, and next week's video will go through those waist measurements in a bit more detail. Now the third is body fat measured obesity, and so this is when scans like a DEXA scan can confirm if someone's body fat percentage is high. Again, this one is regardless of your BMI. Now realistically, this third one is a bit more complicated and also a bit more expensive to measure, so I wouldn't really think it would be too commonly used in real life. But I really want us to pay attention to this second one here, where we are looking at waist measurements regardless of what someone's BMI is. This is going to capture a lot more people to be included as having obesity. And so once someone meets any of these 3 criteria, they will then get further classified as having preclinical obesity, which is where there isn't current organ dysfunction, but there is high future risk, or they will have clinical obesity, where organ dysfunction is already present. Now, if you are wondering what organ dysfunction actually means, it's when the organs in your body are not able to perform their normal function because of damage caused by this excess fat in the body. So, for example, your pancreas is very important for managing blood sugar levels. But chronic inflammation from obesity could damage the pancreas, and it could lead to increased blood sugar and diabetes. Or there's the heart. Damage to that can cause cardiovascular disease. So those are just some of the common examples with obesity, but it really could be any of the organs like your kidneys, your liver, your brain. So let's talk about the study that came out last week then. This is it here. And what the researchers did was they took some data from a massive US research program called All of Us. And this included over 300,000 American adults. And it has information regarding their height, their weight, and also waist measurements. Then they applied the new definition and classifications of obesity that we just went through, which looks at BMI and waist measurements. And here's what they found. When using the current traditional obesity definition, which just looks at BMI, about 43% of people were considered obese, and that actually lines up pretty well with overall trends in the US and also here in Australia. But then when they applied the new classifications, the number of people who would be considered obese, it went up to 68.6%, nearly 70%. Now you may already know why that number has gone up so much, but it's because of that new anthropometric only obesity category, where BMI can be below 30, but waist measurements are high. So these are people who have normal or overweight BMIs, not quite classified as obesity just based on their BMI, but their visceral fat is high, and these are the people that get missed when we look only at BMI. And remembering that we now have preclinical or clinical obesity, well, of the people that were obese, using the new criteria, about 50% of them had clinical obesity, meaning there was already measurable health consequences for them. And what was noticeable was that the older a person was, the more likely they were to have clinical obesity. Now, the whole point of getting these clear definitions and classifications is so that we can get a better idea of someone's health risks and then give them better care. So, did this new definition actually predict health risks any better? Yes, it did. The people with clinical obesity, they had much higher risks of developing diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and even death compared to those with only preclinical obesity. But what I found interesting was that those people who had a BMI that was under 30 but had high waist measurements did in fact have higher risks of diabetes and heart disease. These were people that the current definition of obesity excludes, so this paper shows the usefulness of expanding that definition of obesity so that we can capture and intervene with these people who are getting missed. By capturing these people, we could maybe prevent further health issues for them later on in their life by helping them reduce those waist measurements. Now, if these definitions are taken seriously and we do change how we define obesity, that could have some huge changes for how we treat the condition. But honestly, I would just really like to see waist circumference measurements become common practice rather than just relying on body weight and BMI. Now, no official changes have actually been made yet, but keep an eye out because this research may be paving the way. This isn't about adding more labels for people, it's just about getting more insight and how we can use the same simple tools that we use now to get more accurate pictures about a person's overall health. Now, next week, I will be going through the waist measurements in a bit more detail so that you can see where you stand. But that is all I have to say on this for now. I will link the study that I talked about in the description if you want to go through it yourself. If you have any questions or there's anything you would like to see a video about, then please just leave a comment. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, keep playing the long game.